Alright, so back in familiar territory here. Got the saw moved out from underneath the truck, wiped down the red sanding debris that was all over the legs and the base there. And I'm noticing only really one thing I'm not too thrilled with on the paint, and it's right there on the gearbox cover. And what happened there, that's when the belt was like about to fail on this belt sander, and I was just kind of riding between the ridges there, so evidently need to throw some more paint on that coat. I have played around over here, you know, I've kind of been knocking off some of the overspray. Again, we just kind of held cardboard up on that front, and I've actually used this. We recently picked up this Quinn Scraper, like everything except the blade storage. So you can check that video out if you want to see why. But I'm thinking right here again, we just didn't even bother to mask that. I was playing around, started scraping that up. If we raise this thing up, I've made a couple of revelations as I played around. Now keep in mind, I didn't bother to like paint the inside meticulously or anything. If we want to get the paint off the pulleys, we can do that easily. But I was kind of mocking up the blade, and I was thinking, you know, like, hey, I've got to trim this back cover. I'm just going to go ahead and knock that out, get it out of my life. And as I was doing that, I was like, what is the purpose of that little Thumbwheel Set Screw? And it turns out there's a panel. It's kind of a pain to showcase it, but if I were to loosen this little thumb screw, this panel slides out just like this. So yeah, that would be why we couldn't open it and why we now don't need to trim anything. The directions don't bother to mention that. I was disassembling it in a hurry, and it makes way more sense now. So I was going to say that's like pretty egregious. And you could technically run it with that in all the way, or if it like vibrates and annoys you, you can take it out. You'll just want to be warned that then this side of the saw, whether you're operating vertical or horizontal, the hinge, if you were to ever have your hand there, that would be a grab hazard. But I think what I'm gonna do is kind of start throwing this thing back together. So I'm guessing that we will do the guides and the blade. You kind of need the guides in place to do the blade properly. So we'll do that. I did play with the blade fitment. I've got it here on the gantry crane. And one of the things I was worried about, you know, kind of being like a cheap bandsaw, I wanted to make sure like the blade would seat all the way against the back of the pulley and the teeth still extrude past that, right? And they do. So it's pretty much it, I guess. The reverse operation here, minus the complete teardown. So if you have to, you just this case, you would loosen the pulleys again, get it to where you can get the blade around it with the guides and everything, which again we'll have to put back in place. And then of course we just tighten it up. I always like to have the blades seated on both sides. It's a little sketchy because we don't have the safety there, but we'll try to make that happen. My apologies, I'm losing my voice real bad. Kind of didn't get to drink enough at work today. So anyway, I'm going to get on this and we'll see how it goes. Alright, so in this vertical position, which we'll need to be in to change the blade anyway, you can see right up top we have dropped in our piece with the red blade guard. Again, we didn't paint that. Thought the red and blue would look fine. Did debate an accent color. Might still do it. But in this case, you know, my first couple of cuts are probably going to be angle iron or square tube, and I think that's going to be pretty tight, so we can always back it out. But I've just got this all the way out, and essentially that's where I want it for the blade. What we would have to do on this one, you've got these tiny little Phillips screws here, 1 and 2, that you might need to move. And then right here, this bottom one, I've got it seated all the way in the housing with this bolt right here. And again, you've got these 2 Phillips screws that we would need to get out to route the blade through as well. So essentially I'm going to pull this guard off and probably just one of these screws and kind of kick this out. The blade will have to do 4 things essentially. We're going to need to obviously go around the drive pulley down here. We're going to need to go around the idler pulley up here, and we're also going to have to go through these 2. In this case, you know, they're going to be oriented in this manner, the bearings, and then underneath this housing, so let me just spin this out for you, we are going to have these two bearings. So again, that's why you might be able to cheese it somehow, but I mean, you're probably going to save yourself time just removing the guards to this degree. So you want to route the blade through the bearings, and you want to route the blade around the drive wheels. Drive wheels to turn it, bearings basically to get it oriented correctly to make a cut, as opposed to just running in series with the pulleys. So I'll go ahead and grab the blade. I've got new ones. We'll just put this factory one on, see how many cuts we can get out of it. And it looks pretty gummed up. Some of the teeth, instead of being straight, there's a few that are like this, some that are like that. So I assume whatever they did, to check operation before they ship it out. Probably wouldn't block wood, but anyway, we'll make do with it and see what kind of life we get out of her. So that's the next thing, is I'm just going to wrap the blade and route it. Alright, so pretty simple really. Basically, we just started here, run the blade through, and then I worked my way up to this top one. Note the roller bearing on the top as well. Note this screw needs to be threaded back in. I literally left this top one, just took out this one, the one closest to the other roller guide. Note that the screws will fall and the washers come off, and the washers roll farther than the screws, so I've got to go fishing for that, speaking from experience here. But I always like to make sure that I've got the blade seated all the way back. And again, then you just kind of tighten it. It's almost like a two-man job would be easier, but this is very, very manageable at work. I deal with stuff twice this size. So you just kind of seat it in place, and again, you kind of button everything up. You've got your guard here that'll need the Phillips screw, and then right here we want to put that guard back. So I'll track down the hardware, and we'll have the blade installed. Then we can move to reinstalling the cover. Alright, so everything's reinstalled. This is really in a bad position, especially as tight as the factory had those two Phillips there. You might want a stub, you might want a bit ratchet, just be cautious with them. And then coming around, what I found to do, again, obviously you won't need to do this every time, but this is the larger screw. In that pile we have 4 hinge screws, 2 per hinge. This little guy right here, I went ahead and threaded that in prior to doing anything else, because as you can see, we've got to get this hinge cover on. But I wanted to just have that kind of hold it in place for me, sort of act as a third hand. So that's a tip if you're doing that. Again, you've got 3 holes here, and one of them larger than the others. That's not anything we need to worry about right now. We need to worry about these smaller ones that are again going to be for this little hinge here. So I'll get that positioned properly, slide it into place like we want it. Then this little set screw right here, when we take this loose, it'll drop down and kind of fill in that gap right there, which now you can see it. If that looks like a blade, it is the blade, and that's why you would want that guard dropped so you don't incidentally put your hand there. That is in a pretty awkward position for you to just happen to nonchalantly be leaning or something, but better safe than sorry. So I'll go ahead and get these hinges back on, and then we'll kind of showcase the opening process. Alright, so I've gone ahead, we have got the hinges back on the case of the saw. Worked out real well there. What I've temporarily done, I've removed that top set screw. We're going to go through the process of if we had to open up the case, check the blade tracking, replace the blade broke, whatever it might be. So here's what we need to do that I was unaware of the first time. That set screw, as you'll note, I've got the blade totally covered there. So when I loosen this, slide it up, tighten it back, you'll know that I've exposed the blade. That's not what we were going for. What we were going for is having this cover swing out without running into the body of the saw or that hinge. So again, keep in mind I've already pulled that screw. We've got all the clearance that we need now. We're opened up. We can successfully inspect and service the saw. This little hinge right back. And once more, where this is going to sort of go, it's kind of clips, but I think you see the slot, that's all that matters. I can't really fit through that gap too well, so I'm going to put that screw back in, drop that cover back down. That's essentially assembled, and then I guess we'll kind of move on to the deck or the switch or something along those lines. So I think what we'll do now is take this little tension rod, right, where you can kind of see the hook end and the handle on one end, and we're going to attach it back to the base of the saw and the spring. So right here is the spring, obviously. You can kind of deduce what's happening. Hook and hook, right? There's also two holes we need to pay attention to. This one and that one, and they're going to correspond with those hardware that you see right there. Can't quite remember, those may have been 14s. I'll double check and tell you when we got it on, but I think it's basically going to be we just hook and then position that. If there's any tricks, I'll kind of let you know. Again, just super tight confines here, so I'll get that on and kind of let you know how it went. Alright, so you can totally do the spring after the fact, and that's definitely what I would recommend. That said, this is still a total pain in the butt. You'll note down there it was a 14, not that you can tell that, you'll just have to take my word for it, but you need a 14mm socket or a wrench. In this case, good luck socket fans, it ain't happening. And if you wonder why the Stahlwille is there, in addition to the icon, that is thin wrench territory. Okay, and the icon kind of fit, but it's the anti-slip one, so it's like super cumbersome, especially with that tight clearance. So Stahlwille has saved the day, got it tight for us. Got the spring connected, the blade installed, the guard on. We're making some headway here. So up next, I guess we probably gonna need to unmask this thing, get the vise back on. Of course, the motor, maybe we'll go ahead and do that first, get the motor and cord routed through there. So let's spin around and take a look at that. Alright, so I did notice one issue that I had not thought of, and that issue is under this rag. That switch. You think, what's the problem? It's still connected? You remember how it was terminated? If not, you got a video to go back and look at, buddy. Yeah, but it's kind of that burgundy color. It's plastic. And I'm kind of thinking I'll probably brush it eventually, but I sort of want to see if maybe all that blue doesn't make this look more red than burgundy. And I don't know that it will, especially with that red switch in there. That kind of saves your eye from the optics. But we could dismantle it and paint it, but I kind of think we might brush it. There's a couple places I need to hit anyway. Now the thing that was concerning here is there's like this mysterious white substance, and I don't know what it is, but I don't trust it. So I'm gonna get that off, probably have a mask on just for my own safety and well-being, and then I guess we can route the cord back through. However, if you recall, you can't think automotive all the time. In this case, green is ground, and what that means is we've got paint over the ground area. We're gonna have to knock that off, not once but twice, for both grounds, get those properly terminated. Reverse procedure from the removal, but I'll walk you through it anyway. So I'm going to do some prep work and we'll take you through the next steps. Alright, weapons of choice: a rapidly wearing sanding disc and a brass brush that throws bristles more than it does work. And, just a little bit of time and you too can achieve mediocre results. So main thing there, again, you gotta have a good ground. One of those will be going to the cord, the other to the switch and the motor. And then right here we just kind of roughed that in. We will do a way better job of that here shortly, but for now I guess we're gonna clean the cord up and come in and route it. Again, this where we ground will be the two grounds. This and this will be those long Phillips screws, which will hold the junction box in. This slot here and this slot here are going to be kind of those little plastic clips that hold the motor cable. And then of course on that flip side over there we're actually going to have that seal plate, which I think I can actually zoom in on it right there, the silver thing. These glasses are fogged over. But yeah, I'll kind of walk you through it as we go, but you know, take a little more time than it should due to inferior consumables, but we do have a good ground once again. Alright, so new day out here in the shop. Not really sure where we left off, so in the event that I screwed something up, basically what I'm going to be doing is reinstalling the motor, the power cord, the switch, all that stuff. Again, switch sticks out like a sore thumb. Might not look terrible, but we might brush it at a later date and time. But for now, it's basically just the reverse procedure there. So we'll kind of route the motor through and take it from there. Alright, busting in the new Nepros there. It's a 19mm socket wrench that you'll need for both of the motor bolts. This one's a little funky. I wasn't quite sure what that's for. I've kind of played around and I realized that's for the cover, the pulley cover if you will. And then there's this mystery bracket. I also kind of figured out what that was for, but more on that later. So I've got the motor back in. Of course, before I did that, you can do this with the motor on the ground. You can go ahead and route your cable through. And before we come in and actually hold it up against the base of the saw, I want to address the connections. So in order to do that, we can't just pull them through and start connecting, around and plugging it in. We got to get the backside of this junction box together. So basically, again, this is just going to have the really, really long screws, of course, are going to thread through from our switch. But we've got that little nut with the set screw, and then we've got sort of the gland nut over there, so the wires are going to pass through just like we pulled them out, and we will basically be able to have this thing set in place, and then we will go about making our connections to the switch. Alright, so reverse operations here. You've got the nuts, you've got the junction box, you've got your terminal route, if you will, the cord grabber for Vision 2. You'll note on this cable, you can kind of see that funky spot. That is from the set screw that we've got there, so that tells us where this was positioned from the factory. We'll go ahead and just replicate that, have it oriented like so in the box, and then we can route these through this little hole. You can kind of see there. Again, make sure that if you paint this, you replicate and get a good clean ground for both the motor and the lead. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that, get it buttoned up. The two long Phillips screws you see right there, of course they're actually going to connect the switch to this housing. So we'll go ahead and make that happen, and then we will move on to sort of holding the cord, which again, you've got a hole here and a hole there, which will accomplish that. Alright, so jumping to the motor side of the saw here, we went ahead, we put this cover plate back on. And it's just two Phillips screws. The one towards the back of the saw is going to have this little safety pin, so you want to make sure you reinstall that. Again, by doing this, we've kind of set the cord right where we need it, so we have the exact amount inside the body of the saw, and we've got the right amount here outside the saw. So I'm going to go ahead and we will run this cord, kind of get it in place, and then we'll button up the switch. Alright. So with the power cord kind of buttoned up, again we still got everything loose down here. I think before we actually go ahead and mount this, we're going to replicate our cord holders, if you will. So this little bracket here, again picture the screw running through this slot, and the way it's actually held in place, that's not threaded. There is a nut on the back side of this plastic tab. Again, all this is going to actively do, it's sort of just going to pin your power cord up against the body of the saw. So again, smart thing to do is check for any burrs. I mean, it's a rough casting, but if there's anything there that stabs you, it could pierce the wire and you could have some serious headaches. So everything feels good. It's just the rough cast iron finish here, nothing egregiously sharp or anything. This one is different. This side over here, it's just the cord grab holder. This side over here, we're holding the cord, but we also, in this order, have the safety pin that's going to rest up front. So again, that hole right there. And we'll go ahead and get these two in place. I'll sort of hold the cord up, make sure everything's clear. The only other real issue is your worm gear down here. You'll want to make sure there's no interference. Shouldn't be, since this will literally be pinned right on the inside lip here. But again, play it safe, check anything. If you notice something, file it, hit it with sandpaper, run a Dremel, something. Just knock the sharp off. This right here is actually going to go to the body of the saw, so we'll showcase that in a minute. I went ahead and I grabbed the hardware. This, again, if you pay attention, you've got the lock, the flat, and then the star. Come on. Well, okay, just take my word, that thing in the back that looks sharp, that's because it is. It's the star washer, and that's going to, again, kind of bite into the paint and where we've scraped it off, hopefully provide a good ground. Also grab the handle here. Again, there's a flat spot right there, so you want this to line up accordingly, and then you'll need a 10mm socket or wrench to kind of tighten that down. But yeah, that's what I'll be throwing together here. I'll walk you back through it, and then we'll probably finally move on to the switch. Also, somewhere sitting around the shop, I have a little safety thing that should, in theory, be up right now, but it's not. So we'll get that up here in just a few seconds. I take that back. We're going to go ahead and do what I was originally thinking. We'll put the switch up. We'll finally get to see this contrast color, see if we like it and tolerate it, or it has to be hand painted. But anyway, basically I've just gone in, junction box is held up loosely. I've got the top ground from the motor coming in. Keep in mind the switch connection, your ground was the lower one from the factory, and then in series left to right, black and white is what's coming from our power cord here. And if you recall, these are an exact replica, so our black motor lead plugs here, the white plugs here, black on the outboard, white on the inboard, sort of just straight across, black and black, white and white, opposite one another, black again outboard, white inboard. That'll allow me to do what? Get this with the long Phillips screws in through the junction box. It'll be easier than having to like line it up, take it out, so on and so forth. So I'll make that happen and we will see how this switch looks. Welcome to Let's Play Where Did the Other Screw Go? And I knew one hit the bag, and then the other one dropped out and hit the bag. That's why I went and got the light so we could thread everything in. Works like a champ because I can see the light come through the hole. I've spent like 5 minutes here looking for the other screw, and I thought, well, you know, it must be like on the leg or something, just blending in. Nope. It went in the bag. Didn't go on the bag. It's in the bag. So yeah, be leery of that if you're trying to keep your extension cord clean. But anyway, the light is a nice addition for this. I'll probably use it when we route the little cord keepers as well. So I'll get this buttoned up and we'll kind of showcase the progress here. I do want to stress again, half your star, I know it's going to be logical to just put this lug behind it, put the star as the fastener up against the body of the saw, then your ground lug, then the flat, then the lock, then the screw. That way that bites in and then it transfers through. You get the idea. So again, very easy to be that something that you could screw up. Probably wouldn't make a huge deal if you have a good ground, but it's the way it was from the factory. Also, the ribbed connections on this side, that's how they had them facing out. I tried to replicate that just for strain relief. And speaking of that, I'm going to get some strain off of this wire by getting this thing bolted up to the junction box. Alright, so there it is. Not the most aesthetically pleasing. We're probably going to paint it, but it's not a pressing issue right now. It'll be something we can just do when it's on the saw. Gone ahead, 10mm socket. We tightened this back down, got the handle on. Have not put the tab on. It's right there because I want to lower the saw, make sure we have it lined up as best we can. Cord grabbers went on. Again, this cord grabber over here, cord keeper, I guess would be a better terminology for it. Basically just keeps your power cable to the motor pinned right up against the edge there. We've got it in place. We got that little brace in place. Safety pin I just kind of plugged in for the meantime. And I guess what we're going to do now is lower this thing, which I'll try to do awkwardly reaching over, which probably is not advisable, but we're going to roll with it. Not quite sure where we will come down. Everything cleared beautiful. Didn't even hit the Knipex. So right here, this is kind of how it's looking, but we want to get right here and have that little switch lined up. So essentially, if we're making a cut, we can come in, and as we lower, the machine automatically will turn off for us. So I'll get that, just a number 2 screw there. Then I guess we're to the point. I don't know if we want to put the deck on, stickers, the pulley cover. Maybe we'll do the pulley cover next. So anyway, I'll get that on, make sure that it functions well, at least here in initial off position, and we'll take it from there. Alright, so scratch the pulley cover. I opened it up to go install it, and I realized there were still parts that I had not actually painted on it, so spray bombed the rest of that real quick. I've grabbed the Vise pieces, which they turned out fairly nice. It's my first time really looking at them since we sprayed them. And I think what I'm going to do is go ahead. We've got some tape on here. Of course, all of our warning labels, the stickers. It's questionable if they'll pull off or not. Sort of depends on the adhesive or the quality of stickers that they used. But we also need to get the deck tape off. Of course, we need to do that, A, to look at it, and B, to get those pieces on, which is what we're going to do while the paint dries. So I'm going to go ahead and I guess we will stand this thing up. Kind of need 2 hands for that because, again, the motor's not in place. And just like that, through the power of me setting the camera down, we have that complete. But let's see if we can find a good corner here. Are you ready for the reveal? This should look pretty nice with the blue. Obviously, this isn't like a polished surface or anything. But if I come in and get this strip, Got the miter gauge in the back. That's what we just lifted off, and yeah, that looks real nice with the blue. You can kind of get a better feel for it. Now, switch does bother me, so if we have enough paint left over, we'll probably be brushing that. But that stayed together really well. I guess we could brush the inside there too of the bed, sort of where you have that red. Not a huge deal, but it's something we could do. But yeah, I need to get some real sandpaper. The Dremel just wasn't doing a good job on this front. But now I guess it's the label time, and we'll see how those turn out. Alright, so there you can see all the tape. There's more than the deck. What does that mean? It means the stickers are uncovered. You ready for it? I think it added a nice little bit of contrast there. Again, blue and silver, blue and black, silver and black, yellow and blue. They all look good. So there's our caution. There is our motor specs, which ironically are nowhere near the motor. Here is the product label. All right, there you got a warning. Again, if you hate those, you can take them off. We also have another label there in the belt cover, if you will, or pulley cover, whatever you want to call it, which we have it taped off. So once we get that on, we'll install that. But I guess what we'll do is go ahead and get those vise pieces down so we can kind of have that taken care of while the paint dries, and we'll see how she looks then. Oh, also, I just realized the reason I went and grabbed the twin grips is you might not have been able to tell, but if we zoom in here, you'll probably see, you know, what you think is like 2 bolts up top, 2 on the bottom, 3 in the middle, 7 bolts. You're correct, but we have these little caps on them, and I can get some of them off pretty easy. Some of them are sealed up more than others, particularly those. So I kind of dig that look, really. I mean, I like sort of the all blue there, but it'll look fine with the black hardware. It's just a situation, like since we did just slather paint on that, I'm going to use the twin grips and probably pull them off, but there's a teaser for you. Alright, so there's our pulley, and over here we got the gearbox case. Again, looks just fine in my opinion. Those are able to be pulled off fairly easily, the twin grips. If you want to keep them painted, you know, it's probably advisable you try it by hand or pry from the bottom, but that's what she's looking like now. So hopefully the pulley cover's dry, but I guess in the meantime I'll go ahead and we'll get the vise back on the deck. Alright, so notice the switch kind of gets covered up in the horizontal position when it's closed, which is primarily how we'll run it. So out of sight, out of mind, maybe it'll still bother me though. But coming over, we've kind of just moved the guide back in a little bit so we can clear the vise, which we didn't previously have installed. That's just loosely spun in there. We also put the stop back in. You can kind of see what that does now. That padded surface just where the body of the saw can kind of rest on it. Yeah, I think this is pretty much it minus the cover. And I do think what I'm going to do here, I can't turn this too much because I've got the set screw in it. But this guy right here, keep in mind, no key stock. That's going to go to the gearbox. Keyed pulley goes to the motor. Again, do not lose your little grub screws there. You'll have a hard time finding them. I think I'm going to deburr this because it's not like razor sharp edges, but it's kind of rough. Rougher than I'd want a belt to glide across it. You can kind of, like right there, you can see one of the things I'm talking. I mean, it just like sort of cut me. So I'm gonna run a deburr across all of these pulleys, all phases of it, and just kind of clean it up a little bit. Again, just kind of keep from shredding the belt. Wouldn't happen instantly without like something super egregious, but over time with something that sharp, it's going to significantly cut into the life of the belt. So I'm going to go ahead and deburr these, and we'll continue to let the paint dry on the pulley cover. Alright, that pulley cover is like the worst looking part of this somehow. And I think it goes back to that first round of paint. That can was bad. It had like too much air in it, or I think it was old is what the deal was. But anyway, sitting here and I thought, you know, well, I've spray bombed that again. I guess we're gonna have to pass some more time. So I thought I'm gonna see if this thing runs. So as you can see, we got power to it now. Obviously no issues with the blade turning because no pulley, no belt. That's gonna spin, and this is not. And if we come in, I'll try to one-hand this for you. This is really, oh my gosh. That's found a pinch point right over there. It's the blade cover. Ignore the blue, that's not from this, it's from what I just did. But right here, yeah, that cover, not the greatest thing in the world. So anyway, if I lift this up and then I kick this into position, that'll sort of catch, and ideally you want the safety pin right here through that slot. It's sort of, there's one that lines up top corner. The rest is an oval opening for that bolt to move. But man, that really pinched the crud out of me. What I wanted to test was the switch, so we're going to turn this on in the safety position. Good news here, the motor shaft is spinning. Not sure you can tell. If I were to put like a Sharpie mark on it, you could. But you can certainly hear the vibration. So keep in mind, no pulley, no belt, no blade. So we're totally free on this end. But what I want to do now is kick that safety bracket down and not pinch myself. Wish the handle was a little larger. So that sound was the bracket here kicking down. And so what we're going to do is just lower this and see if I have this lined up good enough. Cool. So we at least know that now. So the motor's good. That's probably something we should have checked before we painted and tore the thing apart. But hey, motor's good. Again, if we put pulleys and a belt on there, we'd be turning a blade, which means we could be cutting something. And yeah, again, obviously, play it safe, unplug it, no power, nothing stupid happens. But yeah, just waiting on paint to dry at this point in time. And I'll probably go find like a 2x4 or something. This blade looks terrible. I mean, the teeth are frayed. They're like, some go out this way and some go out this way. It should never look like that. And I'm thinking they do run these saws before they ship them to you, maybe. If not, I don't know what they would have done. They were very rough with the blade. But the bottom line is, I've always been taught you want to break the blade in. That's what I always do. And I use 4x4s. I don't know that I've got 4x4s here that I want to cut down. Typically, I mean, you don't have to do anything. You almost make like a bookmark is what I always do. I'll do like 2 to 4 cuts, depending if there's vibrations or anything at work. So I'll probably just come in with a 2x4, and that's what I'll use to do 2 things. Number 1, to, even though I think this blade has been used or beat up, we'll properly break it in our way, follow our own protocol. And then 2, we want to check and see how close it is to being square. If it's dead on or if it's not. The instructions are possibly for like a previous model. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't really correlate. So that's why I've just kind of been winging this, learning it on my own type of a thing. But yeah, I think I'll find some little 2x4 piece, just as long as it kind of fills up the vise and you can get a good grip on it, should be fine. And we'll get ready to cut that thing. So I'm also tempted, I was afraid the pulley cover would be like an acoustic nightmare. Based on this, I don't know that it would be. It could amplify the sound. A lot of this was just vibration, I think, from it riding out. But 2 of these screws need to come out. I had it lined up a second ago, but there's going to be 2 screws. I don't remember which 2. We'll double check on that. And then this little guy here, that's actually what that is. It's like a drilled and tapped bolt. So kind of a cool little piece, really. But we'll get that lined up. You kind of just have to position it with the motor shaft. We'll check our clearances there. And then maybe I'll sand it. Maybe I'll have to sand it. I don't know. It looks real bad to me, but... and the thing is, like the cast iron, you can get away with anything. Like you can have runs, this junction, you know, the cover for the gearbox doesn't look great, but it's not a huge deal. But like, that's just like straight up sheet metal, so it looks really bad, unfortunately. So anyway, though, this thing, you know, looking promising. It looks a lot better. I'm pretty happy with the way it's looking, minus the switch. But we did keep red as an accent there, so I don't know, maybe we can do something. But yeah, not too bad thus far, and certainly an upgrade aesthetically, if nothing else. So I'll keep waiting on the paint to dry. I might crack the door, put a fan on it or something to expedite the process. But we very well might also sand it. I'm almost out of paint is the thing. This is a way newer can. That's why everything's sprayed so much better. But if I do have to sand it, I'm gonna like chinch it and just do the outer facing part maybe. So anyway, I'm gonna check into that and see what I can do there. I'll keep you posted, and we'll get it on, and we'll make some test cuts here, see how good or bad the blade and all the tracking and adjustments are, and take it from there. All right, does it look that good? No. Is it painted blue? Kind of. So we're just gonna roll with that. The way this is gonna work, I'm gonna need 2 hands. Obviously, I've got to hold the motor up and kind of get the shaft lined up there. Then you'll note there's 2 slots here. If we take a gander at this seal, which is really hard to do, one hand's holding the pulley cover, there's going to be a flat washer here and a flat washer there. As you might have guessed, those are the two screws that we're going to need to back out, set this down. Then, right here, there's a tab. That's actually going to correlate to the Phillips screw that comes out of the head of that bolt, which again, kind of a trick little deal. So we'll go ahead, I'll get this sort of mocked up, then we put the pulleys on, then we put the belt on, so I'm going to go ahead and get it cranked up. Alright, so this is roughly in place. And what I'm concerned with is obviously, you know, the pulleys aren't there, but if they were, you can see we've got 80, 120, and 200, so you're, you know, top, middle, and low. So this position here, it's kind of grinding on the case. It's not like very bad at all, but there's like a couple thousandths there that are hitting. Anywhere else, it's pretty well, I wouldn't say centered, but it's not going to rub. So what I don't know is where the pulleys and the belt are going to kind of pull and want to articulate this. So the objective here, nothing's tight. You know, we've got these two and the case screw on the back, the trick one. I'm going to reinstall the pulleys again. Motor shaft, as you can see right there, is keyed. That's the difference between the two pulleys. This one is not keyed. This one does have a flat spot right here. Can't really see it through the tape. Kind of can, actually. And so that's where your set screws are going to go there. But once again, hopefully you kept track of your grub screws. And I'm just going to rough those pulleys in, kind of to get a feel for what this is. So might not bolt them down yet, just kind of want to drop them down and sort of see where the belt is going to wind up wanting this to be positioned. Worst comes to worst, we take this off and I'm going to have to clean that out and paint yet again. So let's see how it goes. Alright, so there it is. Went ahead, anti-seize is on everything. I've tried to clean it up. But if I do anything with a motor and a key stock, key gets some anti-seize on it. So apply that concept here. Again, obviously getting these off. Like I said, the instructions are either terrible or they go with a previous model or a newer model or something. It's talking about adjusting the belt tension with bolts that don't exist on this saw. And so basically you can adjust the stop of the motor here with this, and it's really kind of too long of a bolt. When you get right down to it, it makes no sense. There should be a pad like this one as well, since it's driving right into the case of the saw. It is what it is, I guess. And the thing that really makes no sense is this. Like, this will shut just fine, and I don't know if it would vibrate open, obviously, because we haven't run the saw, but where you see the blue paint off, like, this is just a little thumb screw, and then we've got, like, a lock, a star, this spindle nut thing, and it kind of sits down, but I mean, like, you're gonna have to pry the ever-living snot out of that thing, which again, that might be intentional so it doesn't vibrate as bad. I really don't know, and they fail to even mention it. So that's kind of that for now. I guess we're to a point where we can make a test cut if we want to. Obviously we need to check deployment of the blade, make sure everything's clear, but I'll grab the stock, and I've kind of pulled all the tools off of here that might have rattled. Had to use that guy to hammer down on our pulleys. But yeah, just like I said, it's either a previous model or something. I don't know which it is, but there's things that don't match up at all. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and see how this one does and see if we can get a test cut to see if the blade is square or not. Alright, so what is that beautiful cut? It's nothing we did here. That was me with a jigsaw, and this is the deal whenever I fix the fence. Take a 2x4x8, cut it down. It's basically 4 inches you see here. I have to make it 92 to fit. So I have not run this with the pulley cover installed, with the pulleys on, nothing. Not sure if it's going to work, if it's going to throw the belt. Obviously the blade should turn unless the belt gets thrown real quick. It'll just turn once or so and kind of coast to a stop. But we're going to do the virgin fire up here, just plugged her in, and we're going to flip the switch. And I'd like to have you on a tripod so I have two hands, but there's not enough space here. That's why this whole thing's kind of shaky. But we're going to flip her on and see what happens. It's fairly pretty smooth, honestly. So what we're gonna do is I lift up. I'm trying to keep my hand out of that crevice, especially since I've never run this, but you're gonna see that black grayish drop. And we're just kind of gonna shave this. So the goal is to keep the camera cord out. Alright, so the auto stop, that's why I just suddenly and abruptly shot off, seems to be working. That means all the guides cleared. I did make sure of that when we raised it up, obviously. From here it almost looks like that would hit, but it's got a little bit of clearance. Squared it in. I did tighten that down. This pivoting vise, you know, the one that'll do that, she is dead on zero. I put a square to it. The cut right here, I mean, paper thin. This is the same thing I do at work, just with a 4x4, so I'll make several of these cuts. Something I noticed right before I started filming is that there's not a chip brush on this, so that'll be interesting to monitor. This little blade guard might keep some of the crud out, but I've always run saws with chip brushes, you know, so not that they last forever, because they typically either don't ride or they just get worn out super fast, but it looks like we've got a cut. I'm gonna come in over here. This is like really awkward. Like there's not clearance here. Ideally, like you would have the body of the saw come out farther that would match this, and then the handle wouldn't be an issue. We might look into extending the handle, because when that's tight, I mean, like, look, I'm ramming my, you know, and then right here it gets your thumb. It barely even turns. That's just, it's not a great design there, but let's, yeah. That's why she splintered, so that's gonna need to be adjusted some. But it looked relatively straight. It might be off just a little bit, but it's like nothing egregious. Now this would stand a lot better, again, if we didn't have that. So I thought she kind of stopped abruptly. So we're gonna have to adjust. I guess we would need, I guess this sliding up a little quicker might help. And then we'll just have to check kind of like the depth there versus what we're cutting. You would not think it would be an issue based on where it's positioned. Maybe it just splintered off. I don't know, but that looks fairly uniform. Again, keep in mind, this wasn't a, might have not been perfect. I just jigsawed it. Here's the flip side. But anyway, they've got a low battery light flashing, and this is kind of just going to be me dialing this thing in before I cut things that I care about. So there's probably millions of videos on this. If I find it interesting or have camera and battery life, I'll let you know, but this is it. I ran a poll. You voted. You said you wanted 1, the intro, kind of why I picked to buy this saw, and 2, a standalone video for the assembly. And in our case, the assembly was a little bit more complex and time consuming because we disassembled the saw so we could paint the saw. And that's ultimately where we're at now. So obviously I'd like to figure, there's really no place for a chip brush here, ironically. I want to figure something out there. I don't know. I'm going to pay attention to the harmonics and vibrations and everything. I don't know if we could keep tools here, if they would, you know, drive us crazy. If we can't do that, we could possibly come in somewhere off of this and kind of put a catch can, or I might just have a box down low to catch the chips. It's not going to be wood that I usually cut why we bought this, so it's typically going to be metal, exhaust tubing, aluminum, structural metal for fabrication type stuff, and some plastic here and there. Nothing too crazy, obviously nothing too big, or I wouldn't have bought this saw. But just like, you know, 1-inch, 2-inch angle, 2-inch square tube, 3x2 rectangular tubing, exhaust tubing of all kinds of sizes, rod, key stock. I mean, that's always nice. Just simple little things, right? And I think it'll pay dividends over time. But I kind of, like I said, I've got to figure this issue out. And like I said, it could have just been the wood splintering, so I might cut more this time. But I mean, if you're curious, And this is never using the saw. I mean, we basically got ourselves a bookmark here, so it's feather thin. We'll try to cut a bigger piece this time, kind of see how she does. That way I'll get a feel for it. If it splinters off again, I know there's something I've got to adjust. If it works well, I'll just be leery of the next time I'm just shaving something. So it's really more of a shaving than a cut when you think about it. That's it. I'm just going to play around now. So this is kind of the payoff. This was our little Harbor Freight 4x6. We picked this thing up. I think retail is $3.79 or something. I covered it all in the, I guess, originally got it when it was on my mind. 25% off coupon, score. And it looks so much better now. I'm not sure that I'm done with the aesthetics upgrades, ignoring the switch, which, kind of an eyesore when you actually see it. Blade guard looks really good with this blue. We could paint this red, kind of like as a standout caution. Spoiler alert, I'm thinking of using 2 other colors, possibly 3, but I guess red could be the 4th one. So anyway, I'm just going to get to play with a bandsaw now, and I don't know that I should film it, so this is it. This is the payoff. Again, we didn't completely disassemble it because, again, how often am I going to be in the case? Mainly when we just change a bandsaw, there's something catastrophic wrong. I will possibly open up that case and check the gear oil. Should be fine. I think it's 140 weight that you want to run in and replace it. But yeah, I'll just be playing around with it. And if anything comes up, I'll let you know. If I find any issues, all that stuff. If we make upgrades in the future, that'll probably be standalone. But right now, the motor works, which is good news because we didn't test that until today. And then came together, put back together pretty good. There's a lot of stuff not mentioned, not structured right in the instructions. Kind of have to just wing it. That's honestly why I did what I did here. But yeah, it should be a pretty solid little machine. I'm excited about it, and that's what I'm going to do right now is go play with a bandsaw. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts on this. Again, if you wonder, why did I pick this one? Why didn't I get a German bandsaw? Why didn't you buy used American equipment from some place that's having a blowout retirement sale or something? All those questions were answered in part 1. If you're coming from part 1, this is what I do, and this is what we have here. So if you're curious why this is blue and where you can get it, well, you can buy any of them. They're all basically the same, minus the motor, which we covered, and do your own paint job. Some of you might want it to be like fire engine red, match this. Some of you might prefer Knipex colors, purple. Sky's the limit when you get to do what you want to. So with that said, I'm going to go cut some wood, see how this thing does, and we'll catch you back for more action from the shop.